Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Magical duels in the world of Harry Potter are far more than just flashy spell battles. Behind every duel lies history, tradition, and deep meaning. A duel can be a demonstration of skill, a defense of one's honor, or even a fight for survival. Today, I'll share with you the most fascinating facts about magical duels. You'll learn how they originated, what rules govern them, and why some wands command respect, while others inspire fear. Enjoy the video. Number 1. The Hogwarts Dueling Club was created in the 1980s. In a school full of young witches and wizards, rivalry is hard to avoid. In the early 1980s, Professor Dumbledore, concerned by rumors of secret duels among students, decided to bring things under control. Together with Professor Flitwick, he founded the Dueling Club, a safe and supervised space for training and competition. However, the project quickly faded into obscurity. By 1992, the club was revived, this time under the pompous Gilderoy Lockhart. Unsurprisingly, his leadership didn't win the club much popularity among students. Number 2. Underground. Duels were forbidden. Despite the usefulness of the official dueling club, not all professors supported it. Still, it was far safer than wild duels in hallways and empty classrooms. Secret duels were strictly prohibited, and any such clashes could lead to serious punishment. Number 3. Dumbledore saw duels as something deeper. For Albus Dumbledore, the dueling club wasn't just a way to reduce aggression among students. He, more than anyone, understood that darkness could once again descend upon the wizarding world. Preparing young witches and wizards for Voldemort's potential return was a subtle and far-sighted move. Students had to learn to defend themselves should the dark times come. Number 4. Dueling is a magical sport. Many witches and wizards view magical dueling as a true sport. While not as popular as Quidditch, it still has a devoted fan base. If Quidditch is the magical equivalent of football, then dueling is more like fencing or martial arts in the Muggle world. Dueling trains not only reaction speed and accuracy, but also composure, control, and strategic thinking. Number 5. Duels follow strict formalities. A magical duel is not just a chaotic exchange of spells. It's an art form with clear rules. Participants must bow to each other, hold their wands properly, and begin the duel only on cue. These formalities bring an element of honor to the duel and make it more of a ritual than a mere fight. Number 6. Aspen Wands, the choice of duel masters. The wand's material directly affects the magical abilities of its owner. Aspen wood is renowned for its excellence in combat magic. These wands demand a strong and skilled master who can channel their explosive potential. There was even a secret dueling club known as the Silver Spears, which only accepted those who owned Aspen wands. Number 7. Yew wands inspired fear. If Aspen is the choice of the skilled, Yew is the choice of the feared. Yew wands were considered ominous and dangerous, and many duelists preferred to avoid facing their wielders. This reputation was largely influenced by one figure. Lord Voldemort, his wand was made of yew. Coincidence? Unlikely. Perhaps the ancient fear surrounding yew wood wasn't so unfounded after all. Number 8. The duel between Dumbledore and Grindelwald was the greatest in history. The greatest duel in wizarding history didn't take place in a stadium. It happened in secret in 1945 behind the crumbling walls of Nurmengard. Albus Dumbledore faced Gellert Grindelwald, his old friend, his equal, and his shadow. No audience, no applause, just two masters of magic, bound by love, guilt, and prophecy. The fight lasted hours. Some say the sky split, some say the earth shook. No spells were wasted. Grindelwald wielded the Elder Wand. Dumbledore countered every move with spells no one had seen before. "It was like watching poetry and thunder collide," said Bathilda Bagshot, who claimed to have seen the flashes from miles away. They didn't speak during the duel. They couldn't. Everything they needed to say was in the spells. In the end, Grindelwald fell. Dumbledore disarmed him without killing him. "He knew me too well," Grindelwald once muttered from his prison cell in The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. He knew where to aim without aiming at all. With that victory, Dumbledore claimed the Elder Wand, but never used it for power. He locked it away in silence and sorrow. That duel ended a war, it changed history, and it broke two hearts. For all its might, it wasn't about who was stronger, it was about who could bear the weight of what they'd become. And only one of them walked away with both victory and regret. Number 9. Shield charms are the foundation of any duel. The best duelists don't strike first. They hold, they read, they wait. The shield is not retreat, said Alastor Moody. It's survival with purpose. No spell matters if you're unconscious, and no wand wins if the caster's on the floor. That's why Protego is the cornerstone. Simple, fast, powerful. A well-timed shield can end a duel before it begins. Edward Stratford proved it. In the 19th century, he never cast a single offensive curse in the first minute of battle. Instead, he absorbed everything, hexes, stunners, jinxes, without taking a step. He called it the Glass Castle. He once held off 3 attackers for 6 minutes without breaking a sweat. His dueling robe remained spotless. A wizard who cannot defend, he said, has already lost. In 1889, Stratford faced Helena Greengrass in the Royal Magical Open. She was younger, faster, aggressive. Her first volley included Petrificus Totalis, Expulso and Confringo, all blocked. On the 5th exchange, she overreached. He turned her own curse with a mirror charm, dropped a smoke hex, and calmly walked over to disarm her. The crowd never even saw the spell. But they saw the bow he gave her after. Even at Hogwarts, defense is the first lesson. Protego first, Flitwick told his second years, then think about anything else. Harry himself learned that truth in Order of the Phoenix, standing before Voldemort in the Ministry. No strike could save him. Only the shield between him and darkness. Sometimes defense isn't just strategy. It's the reason you live. Number 10. Duels used to be a matter of honor. Once, a wand wasn't raised for sport. It was raised for pride, for blood. In the 1600s, a slight at a dinner table could end in a graveyard. Wizards called it the duel of honor. If someone insulted your name, your family, your bloodline, you challenged them publicly. Refusing was worse than cowardice. It was social death. In 1672, a witch named Elspeth Crouch accused Aldrich Knott of cheating in the Gobstones League. He responded not with words, but with a wand. They met at dawn beneath the standing stones of Thurso. Witnesses say she bowed first. He didn't bow at all. The duel lasted 6 minutes. She struck him with Confringo to the chest. He died before he hit the ground. Elspeth was cleared of charges. Honor was satisfied. The Wizengamot ruled. These duels grew so frequent that the ministry intervened. In 1725, the Honor Regulation Charter was passed. It outlawed mortal strikes in personal duels and required the presence of magical healers. Too many noble names were reduced to ash, said Council Member Beatrix Blood. But even with rules in place, emotions still burned hotter than protocol. Old families remembered every insult, and some still do. By the 20th century, honor duels became rare, but their shadow lingered. The wand chooses the wizard, Ollivander once said, but the wizard chooses when to draw. And in the old days, that choice could be everything. It wasn't about who was right, it was about who would not kneel. Number 11. Unforgivable curses are banned in official duels. There are 3 spells you never cast in a duel. Every trained witch or wizard knows that. Avada Kedavra, Crucio and Imperio, the unforgivable curses. Their use isn't just illegal, it ends careers. They don't belong in sport. We duel to test skill, not to destroy souls, said Elspeth March, head of the International Dueling Federation. She said that the day Victor Ward broke the code, Ward was fast, brilliant, a 2-time winner of the Midlands Crown. In 1981, during the semi-finals in Edinburgh, he faced Salvatore Bellamy, a young Irish champion. The match was close. Ward was losing ground. Then he whispered something under his breath. Bellamy froze, eyes blank, arms slack. A judge screamed, "Imperio!" The arena fell silent. The curse was lifted. Bellamy collapsed. Ward was arrested on the spot. His wand was snapped the same night. The newspapers called it the fall of the golden duelist. Years later, Bellamy would say he couldn't accept defeat, so he chose domination. The message was clear. Skill means nothing without honor. The rules didn't change. They were carved deeper. Unforgivable curses in any duel, practice or tournament mean instant expulsion. No appeals, no excuses. If you can't win without crossing that line, Flitwick once told his students, then you were never a duelist to begin with. Number 12. Professor Flitwick was a world dueling champion. Professor Flitwick was more than a kind smile and a stack of books. Long before he stood on a pile of cushions in the Charms classroom, he stood at the center of a dueling stage, wand raised, applause roaring in his ears. In 1953, at the International Magical Dueling Championship in Vienna, Flitwick defeated Gregor Desmarais of France, a man twice his height, and infamous for disarming his opponents mid-sentence. Flitwick didn't flinch, he waited, then struck with a disarming charm so precise it was later named the Silver Flick. Students never believed the stories at first. He was too quiet, too gentle. But McGonagall once confirmed it with a single nod and a rare smile. "He was a blade in the wind," she said. "You never saw him coming." Dumbledore had seen it too. That's why, when rumours spread of students hexing each other in broom closets, Dumbledore asked Flitwick to form the first official dueling club, not just to stop the chaos, but to teach control. When Flitwick demonstrated the opening posture during the first meeting, even the Slytherins watched in silence. He bowed, flicked his wand, and summoned a dazzling wall of blue flame that held in mid-air, humming. "Defense is not retreat," he said. "It is precision, it is patience." Harry remembered that lesson years later, when facing Bellatrix in the Department of Mysteries. He didn't overpower her, he outweighted her. Behind Flitwick's cheerful demeanor was a champion, not of violence, but of skill, of thought. His duels were like music, measured, elegant, unshakably composed. He once told Luna Lovegood after class, "Magic is a conversation. A duel is simply when both sides shout at the same time." Number 13. Dueling declined after the Second Wizarding War. After the Second Wizarding War, wands went quiet. Too many had seen real death. Too many had raised their wand not for honor, but for survival. Duels, once a form of sport and art, now reminded people of screams in the night and names carved on memorials. Even the Dueling League shut down for 2 years. "There's nothing left to prove," said Ron Weasley in the Deathly Hallows, standing among the ruins of Hogwarts. For many, the sight of a raised wand sparked fear, not excitement. In 2001, when the Department of Magical Games and Sports tried to revive the National Dueling Championship, only 3 contestants signed up. One of them, Michael Corner, later told the Daily Prophet, "I couldn't sleep the night before. I kept seeing Fred." Fred Weasley's death in the Battle of Hogwarts haunted a generation. No one wanted a sport that echoed war. But slowly the silence cracked. A new wave of duelists emerged, not warriors but performers. Young witches and wizards began treating dueling like dance. No deadly spells, no shouting, just elegance, timing, precision. Celia Clearwater, daughter of Penelope, dazzled in a 2010 exhibition duel with a streak of golden shield charms that formed a spiral in mid-air. "It was like watching music," said one spectator. "She didn't win, but she changed something." By 2015, dueling returned, not with violence, but with flair. Hogwarts reopened its dueling club, this time led by Professor Neville Longbottom. "We're not teaching them how to fight," he said. "We're teaching them how not to be afraid." And that was the point. Magic hadn't changed, but its meaning had. Number 14. Every duelist has their own strategy. Every skilled duelist enters the arena with more than just spells, they come with a plan. A magical duel might seem like chaos, like fireworks and fury clashing mid-air, but underneath the surface lies calculation. Some duelists rely on speed, hurling stunning spells in rapid succession to overwhelm their opponent. Others wait, conserve energy, defend, and strike only when the opponent shows a weakness. And then there are those who use deception, illusions, distractions, even words, to confuse and break their rivals' focus. Melisande Barrow was one of them. A witch from the Scottish Highlands, she earned the nickname the Velvet Blade for her calm smile and sudden, brutal wins. Her signature move, starting every duel with Pilus Inflatus, the puffing charm, a harmless spell used to inflate pillows. Most duelists would hesitate, puzzled. One even laughed aloud, but that moment of confusion was all she needed. A second later, Melisande would unleash a barrage of silent stunners and immobilizing jinxes. Underestimating her, said Professor Flitwick, was the last mistake many ever made on the platform. She believed distraction was as powerful as any curse. Magic begins in the mind, she once said, and nothing clouds the mind like a question you don't expect. Her style inspired a generation of duelists who studied psychology as much as spellwork. Among them was Dirk Cresswell, who reportedly won the 1992 Underground Dueling tournament using a variation of Melisande's technique, casting a cheering charm before firing off Confringo. Even Harry himself once fell for a similar tactic. In the Order of the Phoenix, during a DA session, Zacharias Smith tried to distract Harry with questions mid-duel. "That's not how it works," Harry snapped, but it worked. He missed his mark. Strategies vary, but one thing is clear. In a duel, it's not just the wand that wins, it's the wit behind it. Number 15, a wand can refuse to fight. In the shadowy tradition of magical dueling, where wands clash like swords and the very air crackles with ancient power, one fact remains largely unknown to the untrained or the overconfident. The wand may refuse to duel, not out of malfunction or material failure, but out of sheer will. This idea, strange to some and terrifying to others, is an acknowledged truth among elder witches and duel masters. Wands, as Ollivander often reminded his customers, are not mere tools. They are sentient, opinionated, and, at times, unpredictable extensions of their chosen wizards. When a wizard steps into the circle of magical combat and doubts cloud his heart, the wand may hesitate, and in some cases it may even betray. Wand loyalty is a complex force, built not just on possession, but on a slow-burning bond of magic and intent. According to the Essential Defense Against the Dark Arts, a wand chooses the wizard, but it may take years before it serves him in full. The Ministry of Magic's Department of Magical Law Enforcement has logged several obscure incidents where wands acted out of alignment with their wielders. Most of these cases were dismissed as nerves or faulty incantations, but not the incident in 1879, an event that rattled the entire British magical community and exposed a truth many preferred to keep hidden beneath the layers of wand lore and pride. Randall Brickwell, then a celebrated duelist and heir to a long line of auras, was a man of calculation and polish. With dark green robes and a calm, clinical demeanour, he had bested over 24 opponents in open duels. It was at the All-Britain Magical Combat Finals in June of that year when everything unravelled. His opponent, a relatively unknown charms professor named Edmund Tavy, was not expected to last more than a few minutes. Yet moments into the duel, something truly bizarre occurred. Just as Brickwell raised his wand to cast a disabling jinx, the U-wand jerked in his hand, twisted unnaturally, and soared, almost gracefully, through the air into Tavy's open palm. The silence that followed was heavier than a stunned curse. No one moved. The judges exchanged glances. A healer fainted, and Brickwell stood frozen, one hand still raised, the other empty, as if trying to comprehend a betrayal deeper than magic could explain. Tavy, stunned as well, did not retaliate. He simply held the wand and stared at it. Later, in an interview with Witch Weekly, Tavy said, "It was like it recognized me. It stopped humming the moment I touched it. I don't think it ever wanted to hurt me." It was only after the duel was voided and an investigation launched by the British Duelists Federation that the truth began to unfold. The wand, it turned out, had belonged to another, a warlock named Algernon Pritchard, who had died during a failed counter-curse operation in the Hebrides. The wand had been recovered and passed into the ministry's storage, where it was eventually claimed by Brickwell through legal inheritance. But magic, as history teaches us, is rarely impressed by paperwork. Wand law expert Myra Tweddle, in her now out-of-print volume, Hearts of Holly and Hornbeam, argued that a wand's loyalty isn't erased by simple transfer. A wand forms what might be called a magical imprint, she wrote, based on alignment of spirit, depth of connection, and mutual purpose. If the new master lacks sufficient strength of bond, the wand may obey technically, but it will not trust. And trust, as Brickwell learned, is everything in a duel. One of the more troubling revelations from the investigation came from a magical residue test performed on the wand itself. It showed a lingering aura signature of Pritchard that had not fully faded even 4 years after his death. "It was almost like the wand was haunted," said Inspector Grimsley of the Office of Improper Spell Usage. "It fought against Brickwell's commands, not violently, just reluctantly, as though it was waiting for someone else." This hesitancy of wands, especially in high-stress moments like duels, can have catastrophic results. In the worst cases, spells backfire. In others, they simply fizzle. A duel is not merely a test of knowledge or reflex. It is a test of unity between wizard and wand. Dumbledore once stated, "You must be in harmony with your wand. A house divided against itself cannot stand, and neither can a spell cast from an unwilling wand." This quote, though often overlooked, reveals a chilling truth when viewed through the lens of Brickwell's humiliation. Following the event, Brickwell withdrew from public life. He declined all interviews, resigned from his Aura commission, and was rumoured to have travelled to the far north in search of a new wand. There are whispers, though unconfirmed, that he later settled among the reindeer herders of Kautokeino and lived out his days practising silent magic, far from the dueling circles and the biting judgment of society. Tavy, for his part, never again participated in an official duel. He reportedly returned the wand to Pritchard's descendants, saying only, "It wasn't mine to keep." The case is now studied at Hogwarts in third-year charms, where Professor Flitwick urges students to understand the deeper connection between wizard and wand. "It is not obedience," he says, "but consent. Your wand is not a slave. It is a companion." The event has also led to a number of minor reforms in wand reassignment protocols at the Ministry, including a mandatory waiting period for newly inherited wands before their use in high-level spellwork or competitive dueling. Modern wand-makers, too, have become more cautious. Garrick Ollivander, before his disappearance during the Second Wizarding War, once warned Harry Potter that the wand chooses the wizard. That much has always been clear to those of us who have studied wand law. But loyalty, Mr. Potter, loyalty is a curious thing. In this context, the notion of wand rebellion becomes less absurd and more inevitable when loyalty is tested and mistrust prevails. Number 16. Some duels lasted for days. In the shadowed corridors of magical history, few phenomena capture the imagination as vividly as the ancient tradition of magical dueling. Though modern audiences, conditioned by classroom duels and tournament spectacles, might associate magical combat with short-lived exchanges of hexes and shields, the reality in earlier centuries was often far more intense and relentless. In a time before the Ministry of Magic imposed formal rules and guidelines, duels between wizards were fierce battles of endurance, cunning, and pride. These were not mere contests of skill, but prolonged confrontations that tested not only magical power, but the will to persevere under pain, exhaustion, and sometimes mortal peril. The most infamous of such duels is still spoken of in whispers in the oldest wizarding households, a legendary 3-day and 2-night battle between two powerful patriarchs, Pollux Black and Cygnus Rosier. It was the year 1674, a time when the bloodlines of pure-blood wizarding families defined one's honor more than even magical prowess. Pollux Black, the iron-willed elder of the Black family, had risen to dominance not only through blood, but through fear. His control over dark magic was whispered about even in the halls of Durmstrang, where students often spoke of him with a mix of reverence and dread. Cygnus Rosier, head of the equally ancient Rosier line, was no less formidable. A scholar of forbidden curses and mental manipulation, Cygnus was considered a master of the subtle arts of magical warfare. Their conflict, though personal in nature, had roots that bled into the politics of the time, disputes over ancestral land, insults traded at the Wizengamot, and, as some sources claim, a long-forgotten betrayal involving an illicit duel and a vanishing vault of Gringotts gold. What began as a formal challenge escalated rapidly into a confrontation of near-mythical proportions. The duel took place in the Forest of Dean, chosen for its seclusion and magical neutrality. No one knows who fired the first spell. Some say it was Pollux wielding a modified blasting curse that tore a fissure through the earth. Others insist it was Cygnus, unleashing a curse of confusion that turned the forest itself into a labyrinth of illusions. What is certain is that neither man intended to hold back. They conjured whirlwinds of magical force that sent trees crashing, summoned phantoms of flame and ice, and manipulated the elements with a savagery that scorched the land and echoed through the woods for miles. Magical creatures fled the area in droves. Even centaurs, known for their stoicism, were said to have relocated deep into the forest's heart. The duel's length alone set it apart from most recorded confrontations. Most wizarding duels last under 10 minutes. A sharp exchange of curses, quick disarmament, a victor and a defeated. But this was something else entirely. According to later testimonies and scattered journal entries found among the ruins of Black family vaults, the two wizards paused only for moments at a time, enough to catch their breath or drink a potion hastily brewed under pressure. There were no seconds to intervene, no mediators to cry for surrender. With both men too proud to yield and too powerful to fall quickly, the duel devolved into a grueling war of attrition. At the end of the first day, the ground was scorched, and both men had suffered wounds that would have incapacitated any lesser wizard. Cygnus bore a seeping burn across his arm, inflicted by a particularly vicious fiendfire lash that Pollux had unleashed in a moment of fury. Pollux's vision was blurred from a psychological hex that twisted perception, a Rosier specialty, making every spell he cast a gamble. They fought on using ancient charms, shields of layered protection, and obscure curses long since banned by the modern ministry. One such curse, allegedly used by Cygnus, caused Pollux's own wand to writhe and hiss in his hand, nearly burning him alive. In retaliation, Pollux conjured a choking smog of ash and steel shards, a transfiguration so violent that it left his own wand splintered at the tip. By the second night, both were fighting less like duelists and more like cornered beasts. Spells grew sloppier, casting slowed, but the damage only intensified. Trees fell like matchsticks, the air shimmered with residual magic. A flock of thestrals flew overhead and immediately veered away, as though sensing death was too near. Witnesses, mostly hidden family members watching from afar with enchanted lenses, reported hallucinations and magical disorientation merely from proximity to the duel. One servant of the Blacks later claimed that her hair had turned permanently grey after standing too close for too long. She also recounted seeing Cygnus collapse to one knee, only to rise moments later with a roar that shook the air, his body outlined in what appeared to be a black aura of anti-magic. An untraceable spell thought extinct since the time of the founders. On the dawn of the third day, the duel was nearing its inevitable, devastating end. Neither Pollux nor Cygnus could stand without trembling. Their clothes hung in tatters, and their bodies were riddled with magical burns, open wounds, and signs of near-total magical depletion. It was then, and only then, that they both made the same move, a last-ditch curse designed to obliterate the other's wand. The collision of their spells created a detonation, so violent that it cracked the earth beneath them, and a column of blue fire rose 50 feet into the air, visible from nearby villages. When the smoke cleared, the two men lay on the ground, unconscious but alive, their wands shattered beside them. Neither had won, and yet neither had lost. It took 3 healers and 2 days at St. Mungo's just to stabilize their conditions. For weeks afterward, they drifted in and out of consciousness, suffering from severe magical fatigue and spell shock. Number 17. Certain spells are banned, even in training. In the world of magical dueling, much like in any disciplined form of combat, there are laws, unwritten codes of honor, and very specific regulations that must be respected, even when wands are raised in mock battle. This truth, however, is not always obvious to those newly initiated into the art of the duel. Often, young witches and wizards are tempted by the power of flashy incantations, the allure of dominance, or the need to prove themselves. Yet within the hallowed halls of institutions like Hogwarts and Ilvermorny, certain spells are never to be cast, even in the heat of competition, even in training. Among these forbidden enchantments are those that toy with the body or the mind, spells considered so invasive and dangerous that their use is banned outright. It might surprise many to learn that even in the officially sanctioned dueling clubs, where students are encouraged to refine their magical reflexes, test their mettle, and cultivate discipline, not all magic is welcome. The rules are clear, if not always followed. Any spell that alters the physical structure of a human being is off limits. Transfiguration, while a cornerstone of magical education, is deemed too unpredictable and unstable for combat scenarios. Even Professor McGonagall, a master of the subject, warned her students on several occasions about the terrible consequences of misapplied transformations. Indeed, she once told a fourth-year class, "Transfiguration is not some trick to amuse friends or humiliate rivals. It is a precise, dangerous branch of magic." Treat it as such. Still, despite the warnings, there have been incidents that reshape the guidelines of magical combat forever. One such episode occurred not at Hogwarts but across the Atlantic within the distinguished Magical Academy of Ilvermorny. The event, now known in faculty circles as the Triton Incident, forced educators worldwide to re-evaluate the safety protocols of magical dueling. It began with what seemed to be a friendly duel between 2 fifth-year students, Josephus Greaves of Thunderbird House and Elliot Klein of Wampus. The two were known rivals, their tension sharpened by competitive pride and whispered accusations of sabotage during potions assessments. On that chilly October afternoon, they stood across from each other in the Ilvermorny dueling chamber, surrounded by their peers. Their duel had started with the usual fare: Expelliarmus, Protego, Stupefy. But Josephus, eager to outshine Elliot once and for all, made a reckless decision. He cast a partial human-to-animal transfiguration spell, a variation of the spell that McGonagall herself once described as risky, volatile, and wildly inappropriate for combat. The incantation was incomplete, his concentration fractured by adrenaline. The result was grotesque. Elliot was instantly twisted into a half-man, half-triton creature. Scales bloomed across his skin, gills gasped for air along his neck, and his legs fused into a grotesque, finned tail. What followed was pure chaos. Professors sprinted into the chamber, medical staff were summoned. Attempts to reverse the spell failed again and again. Elliot, unable to speak, floundered in a conjured tank while specialists tried to decipher the magical damage. For an entire week he remained suspended between forms, his mind reportedly still human, but locked in an alien body. Josephus was expelled, not just suspended but formally cast out of Ilvermorny, his wand snapped by a decision from the North American Confederation of Wizards. He later disappeared from public view entirely, his name now cited only in cautionary tales. This singular event sent ripples across the magical world. In an emergency summit between representatives of the major magical academies, Durmstrang, Beauxbaton, Ouagadougou, Castelobruxo, Mahotokoro, and Hogwarts, a joint agreement was reached. No transfiguration spell of any kind was to be used in combat dueling, whether in friendly competition or serious challenge. The rules were written into every school's handbook. Hogwarts revised its own dueling club guidelines that same year, with Professor Flitwick personally overseeing the update. "We do not duel to humiliate," he reminded his students. "We duel to learn control, precision, restraint." Alongside transfiguration, another class of spell fell under intense scrutiny, those that influenced the mind. The Imperious Curse had already been classified as one of the unforgivables, but its very concept, a spell that robs a person of their free will, casts suspicion on all mind-altering magic. Obliviate, typically used by trained professionals to erase specific memories for the safety of the Statute of Secrecy, was suddenly seen in a different light. Even a single miscast Obliviate in a duel could wipe away crucial memories, spells, friendships, names. The mind, like the body, was deemed sacred ground in the duel. There was one notable case that reinforced this decision. A Hogwarts student in the 1970s, now only referred to in school documents as RT, attempted to use a weak version of Confundus during a mock duel. His opponent, caught mid-spell, staggered off the dueling platform and broke his wrist in the fall. The match was stopped, and RT received a month-long suspension from the club. But it wasn't the physical injury that concerned the staff most. It was the eerie look of disorientation on the victim's face, his memory fractured, his thoughts spiraling out of control. The consequences could have been far worse. Even spells that do not directly manipulate body or mind have been debated. Legilimency, for instance, is not explicitly forbidden, but it is discouraged, as it infringes upon the privacy of one's thoughts. Dueling, after all, is not a game of espionage. The focus must be on skill, not deceit. Similarly, enchantments designed to control emotions or simulate physical pain are treated with suspicion. Hogwarts' current handbook reads, "Any magic whose intention is to dominate, disable, or degrade the opponent beyond the scope of fair engagement shall be treated as a violation of the duel's purpose." Number 18. Some duelists were inspired by Muggle martial arts. In the world of magical dueling, elegance and precision have always stood above brute force. Some of the most legendary wizards throughout history have won their battles, not by overpowering their opponents, but by outmaneuvering them with grace and strategy. Few embodied this philosophy more completely than Kenjiro Takada, a Japanese wizard whose influence reshaped the very notion of what it meant to duel with wands. Born in Kyoto in 1889 to a long lineage of spellcasters, Takada displayed an extraordinary sensitivity to magical rhythm from an early age. What made him unusual, however, was not his wand technique, but the source of his inspiration, the silent discipline of Muggle martial arts. Takada spent his formative years living in a region of Japan that, though rich in magical tradition, also kept close ties with ancient Muggle dojos. Rather than viewing non-magical combat as inferior, he studied it. He was fascinated by the controlled movements of Aikido, an art that taught not just how to fight, but how to yield, redirect, and dissolve aggression. To Takada, this resonated deeply with what he believed dueling should be, an exercise in harmony, not chaos. Unlike many of his peers who approached dueling as a contest of might, Takada believed the wand was an extension of the body, and the spell a consequence of posture and breath. He did not keep these ideas to himself. At the age of 25, after winning a national dueling competition in Nagano using his now famous silent stroke technique, Takada opened the Yamamura School of Motion Magic. Here, he taught not only the fundamentals of magical defense and attack, but the integration of breathing patterns, joint positioning, and balance derived from Muggle disciplines. His students trained barefoot on wooden floors, their robes belted high for freedom of movement, their wands gripped lightly between their fingers as if they were an extension of the spirit rather than a weapon. Takada's philosophy clashed violently with the European standard, which emphasized shield spells, aggressive counters, and rapid-fire incantations. At the time, magical dueling in Britain and France often devolved into blunt exchanges of power, where the one with the stronger spell work inevitably triumphed. Yet, Takada's methods proved that skill could outshine strength. One of his most famous duels occurred in 1927, when he faced off against French champion Gilles Verdu at the International Dueling Symposium in Cairo. Verdu was known for his ferocity, but Takada never raised his voice above a whisper. His movements were so fluid, his spellcasting so quick and silent, that Verdu was disarmed and immobilized before he even realized the duel had begun. Historians later wrote that Takada's duel was more a performance than a battle. "It was like watching water shape stone," remarked a witness in the Daily Prophet's international section. Takada moved with such serenity that it was difficult to believe he was in combat at all. This approach earned him admiration from the international community and planted the seeds of respect for Muggle martial concepts among some of the more open-minded magical cultures. Within Takada's teachings, the principle of Kazushi, the idea of breaking an opponent's balance, became central. He interpreted magical imbalance not only as a physical misstep, but also as a lapse in emotional control. "A wizard cannot duel from a place of rage," he once wrote in his treatise Wind and Motion, The Philosophy of Combat. "Fury ungrounds the caster. The spell will fly, but it will not land where it ought." This emphasis on inner equilibrium made his school famous for producing duelists who seemed unnervingly calm, even in the face of lethal threats. Takada's work did not go unnoticed in Hogwarts. Though traditionalist in many respects, Albus Dumbledore showed interest in foreign philosophies of magic, and when he became headmaster, he introduced an optional dueling tactics seminar that included discussions on Takada's method. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore's army trains in the Room of Requirement, Hermione refers to the importance of movement and posture. While not mentioned directly by name, scholars suspect this line was influenced by Takada's style. "You can't just shout the spell, you've got to mean it, move with it." Later, generations of duelists began integrating more subtle body movements into their practice. One notable example is Akiko Muramatsu, a descendant of Takada's first class. She traveled to Brazil in the 1980s, where she defeated three-time dueling champion Roberto Junqueira with a sequence of spells so synchronized with her footwork that Junqueira accused her of dancing rather than dueling. She smiled and said, "Perhaps there is no difference." Despite his elegance, Takada's methods were not without danger. The softness of his movements often gave opponents a false sense of security. He disarmed with a flick, incapacitated with a whisper. A common phrase among his students was, "To see Takada move is to survive, to blink is to fall." In fact, in one recorded duel during the Japanese magical reformation of 1933, Takada was attacked by two rogue duelists using dark magic. He incapacitated them both in under 10 seconds. Observers swore they saw no more than a blur of movement and a sharp sound, like wind slicing through silk. The notion that Muggle practices could inform magical excellence remained controversial, especially among European purists. The Magical Purity Front in Britain even accused Takada of corrupting magical heritage with non-magical rituals. But such voices quieted after Takada's demonstration in the Wizarding Council's chamber in 1941, where he took on 5 auras in a choreographed exhibition duel and defeated them all without drawing blood. His performance was seen as a statement of philosophy that power does not require violence, and magic, when guided by harmony, becomes a force of precision. Takada's life was not without tragedy. During the Second Wizarding War, his school became a refuge for young wizards fleeing persecution. He refused to align with either side, claiming that his magic was devoted only to the preservation of beauty and balance. In 1944, his school was raided by dark wizards seeking to eliminate neutral safe havens. Takada fought them off but was fatally wounded in the process. He passed away with his wand still in hand, surrounded by the students he had trained. According to legend, his final words were, "A quiet step, a clean heart." After his death, the Yamamura school continued, and his teachings spread underground through scrolls, journals, and oral storytelling. His movements were codified into a system now known as Shizukana Maho, or quiet magic. Practitioners today can be found in places as distant as Canada, New Zealand, and even parts of Scandinavia. While the mainstream wizarding schools still teach standard dueling forms, many modern auras privately study Takada's techniques to enhance their reflexes and reduce their magical signatures during stealth operations. Interestingly, while the unforgivable curses are rarely taught in any formal institution, some argue that Takada's method is one of the few capable of neutralizing such spells without direct confrontation. His philosophy taught that intercepting intent was more effective than countering magic itself. This echoes Dumbledore's reflection in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. It is the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness, nothing more. Takada believed that understanding an opponent's mind, their balance, was the path to victory. Today, the legacy of Kenjiro Takada challenges us to rethink the dichotomy between Muggle and magical. His life demonstrated that strength is not the loudest spell or the biggest explosion. Instead, it is the stillness between the motions, the breath before the cast, the awareness that in dueling, as in life, control is born not from domination, but from understanding. His presence lingers in every quiet step a duelist takes, every deliberate wand movement, and every whispered incantation delivered with intent and grace. Number 19, emotions can influence the outcome of a duel. In the heat of a magical duel, spells fly like arrows, and wand work dazzles the eye, but beneath the surface of incantations and counters lies a deeper current, emotion. It is often overlooked by those who study the art of defense against the dark arts, or even by duelists themselves who train endlessly to master form and finesse. Yet history, as well as personal testimonies from some of the greatest duelists in wizarding lore, reveals that emotion, raw and unfiltered, can determine the outcome as surely as any well-placed hex. Magic, at its core, responds not only to thought, but to feeling. A wand may obey commands, but it is emotion that fuels the fire behind them. This principle is no better exemplified than in the case of Serafina Dumont, a renowned duelist from early 20th century France, who once held the title of the European dueling champion for 7 consecutive years. Serafina, whose name now appears in nearly every textbook on advanced dueling theory, was not only known for her precision and power, but for her teachings about emotional balance in battle. Her most famous quote, "Your wand reflects not your power, but your feelings. If your anger outgrows your will, you will lose not to your opponent, but to yourself," has become a mantra among professional duelists. During her fateful duel in 1927 against the notorious dark wizard Bertrand Lefebvre, Serafina was at a disadvantage. Lefebvre was infamous for his unrelenting aggression and use of borderline dark magic. Spectators remember the moment when Serafina, cornered and wounded, seemed ready to fall. But rather than give in to panic or unleash rage, she closed her eyes briefly, and, as witnesses later described, her entire demeanor shifted. Her final spell, a non-verbal expulso, knocked Lefebvre across the platform and shattered his wand. It wasn't the spell itself that was remarkable, but the clarity with which it had been cast. It was magic, drawn not from fear or fury, but from unwavering inner stillness. The phenomenon of emotion-driven power can be traced even further back. as early as the 18th century. In a duel between Ignatius Thorne, a British auror, and a rogue spellcaster named Malcolm Vane, records show that Vane, though the more technically proficient of the two, lost control of his curses in a fit of rage. His spells became erratic and destructive, setting fire to surrounding trees and injuring onlookers. Meanwhile, Thorne remained calm, countering each assault with measured precision, eventually disarming Vane and placing him under arrest. This case remains archived at the Ministry of Magic with a note in the Aura office. Skill is nothing without clarity. Even Hogwarts itself has seen emotion tilt the scale in spellcasting. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry is training Dumbledore's army, he finds that spells like the Patronus Charm work only when summoned with sincere and focused emotion. When he says, "Working hard is important, but there is something that matters even more, believing in yourself. It's not just encouragement, it's a reflection of magical truth." The Patronus responds to hope, to joy, and above all, to personal conviction. In dueling, the same principle applies, though the emotions may vary. Take the example of Bellatrix Lestrange during her battle at the Department of Mysteries. Her magic was undeniably powerful, but her fury, especially when provoked, made her unpredictable. She was strongest when she wielded cruelty with calm confidence. However, after she kills Sirius Black and provokes Harry, her own spellcasting begins to lose its rhythm, her aim becomes wild, and even Voldemort chastises her for her recklessness. Emotion granted her power, but once unbalanced, it weakened her control. Severus Snape, though reviled by many, was a master of emotional discipline. His duels were often described as silent thunderstorms, no flash, no roar, but utterly lethal. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, during the flight from Hogwarts, Snape duels multiple opponents without raising his voice, without the slightest falter in breath. Every motion of his wand is exact, and none of his spells are wasted. His emotion is contained, channeled into precision. He teaches us that mastery over self is mastery over the wand. Emotional clarity, however, should not be confused with emotional suppression. Dueling masters agree that trying to eliminate feeling altogether can backfire. Emotions must be present, but controlled. Hermione Granger once remarked during a discussion in The Goblet of Fire that a spell can backfire if you're distracted or emotional. Yet during the Battle of Hogwarts, Hermione's own casting is amplified by her desperation to protect her friends. What allowed her to succeed was not the absence of fear, but her ability to keep it from drowning her concentration. Fred and George Weasley, known more for pranks than prowess, once engaged in a short but fierce duel against Ministry officials when their joke shop was being investigated under Umbridge's regime. Despite being outnumbered and under pressure, they performed an impressive display of spells. The reason? Their emotional state, defiant, fearless, and united. Their magic was chaotic but deliberate, driven by twin purpose, not rage but rebellion. Then there is Harry Potter himself. During his final duel with Lord Voldemort in the Deathly Hallows, the balance between emotion and will is at its most visible. Voldemort's spells are deadly but driven by cold calculation and blind arrogance. Harry, on the other hand, fights not for domination but for protection, for closure, and for love. When their wands connect in that last moment, it is not Voldemort's power that fails him, it is his inability to feel anything but hate. Harry's victory is not of might, but of emotional depth. The concept is further reinforced by Ollivander's assertion that the wand chooses the wizard. But what he rarely explained is that wands also respond to their wielder's emotional frequency. Some wands are more attuned to boldness, others to subtlety. That's why when Ron Weasley attempts to use a wand not his own in Chamber of Secrets, his spells misfire. It's not just about compatibility, it's about emotional harmony. Magical duels then become more than battles of light and sound. They are dances of the heart, A duelist's mind must be clear, but the heart must be engaged. Emotional states can heighten magic's raw energy or scatter it uselessly into the air. As Serafina Dumont proved time and again, the strongest spell is not the loudest, but the most emotionally aligned. And there are tragedies, too, when emotion consumes the caster. In 1943, a young witch named Marlo Priwet lost control during a sanctioned duel in Bulgaria. Her brother had been killed by her opponent months before in a skirmish. Driven by revenge, her curse surged beyond intention. The result was a fatal backlash that killed her instantly. Her wand was found scorched and splintered. Witnesses said the energy around her snapped like glass breaking. The duel was struck from records, not for secrecy, but for grief. Emotions in dueling are not ornaments, they are the undercurrent. Anger gives strength, but narrows vision. Fear weakens the spell before it forms. Joy lifts the wand, but may lack the gravity for defense. Confidence, however, earned and grounded, may be the most dangerous weapon of all. It is not pride, it is not ego, it is clarity with direction. The story of Serafina Dumont remains the most taught case study for a reason. Her technique was flawless, yes, her power undeniable. But what truly elevated her was her inner composition, a harmony of focus and feeling. In her final recorded interview, she said, "When I step onto the platform, I do not ask what I want to prove. I ask what I want to protect. The answer shapes the spell before I ever raise my wand." In the end, every magical duel is two battles in one between wands and one within. Those who train only for the former may dazzle a crowd, but those who master the latter are the ones who win. The wand obeys the wizard, but the magic obeys the heart. Number 20. Duels can be used in magical court trials. In the intricate world of magical law, there exists a seldom invoked tradition so old and steeped in formality that many modern wizards consider it a relic of a bygone age. This practice, known as the duel of justice, allows two disputing parties to settle a legal disagreement through a regulated magical duel. The notion may seem archaic, even barbaric to some, but for those who still believe in the solemn dignity of one-to-one resolution, it is an embodiment of honor. Far from the reckless duels that fill the corridors of Hogwarts between impetuous students, a duel of justice is a structured and ceremonial event. Governed by the Wizarding Council, it is permitted only under circumstances where legal arguments falter and the truth hides itself too well to be seen. When evidence is too obscure, witnesses too unreliable, and emotions run too deeply for calm discussion to prevail, the Council may grant permission for justice to be settled not in words, but in spells. Perhaps the most famous instance of this rare proceeding occurred in the year 1722 in the verdant hills of northern England. The Montague family, one of the oldest pure bloodlines in Britain, found itself on the verge of collapse after the sudden and mysterious death of Lord Benedict Montague. The patriarch had amassed a fortune in enchanted textiles and rare potion ingredients, with vaults at Gringotts bulging with centuries-old treasures. Upon his death, however, his final will vanished, suspected to have been destroyed, though by whom no one could determine. Left without legal testament, the inheritance was to be split between his two sons, the composed and respected Lord Arthur Montague, and his younger brother, the fiery and impetuous Cedric. What might have been a civil settlement quickly spiraled into accusation and outrage. Cedric claimed Arthur had secretly influenced their father to change the will in his favor, while Arthur insisted that his brother was driven by jealousy and desperation. The case quickly caught the attention of the Ministry's Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The evidence, though plentiful, was inconclusive. Letters had been burned, magical seals had been tampered with, and the family house elf, the only eyewitness to Benedict's final days, refused to speak due to a binding enchantment. As tempers escalated and public interest swelled, the Montague brothers jointly petitioned the Wizarding Council to allow a duel of justice. To the astonishment of many, the council agreed. It was the first sanctioned judicial duel in over a century, Held at the standing circle of Durnhold, a ring of ancient stones infused with anti-interference charms, the duel drew a crowd of spectators, politicians, and legal historians. It was not a spectacle of violence, but a demonstration of discipline, wit, and magical control. According to the records preserved in the Ministry archives, the duel lasted precisely 23 minutes and 14 seconds. Witnesses described the brothers as equally matched in power, though starkly opposed in style. Arthur's spells were elegant, efficient, and defensive. Cedric's, by contrast, were aggressive, often experimental, and occasionally reckless. At one point, Cedric conjured a serpent of living flame, which Arthur countered with a frost charm so refined. It froze the fire in mid-air. The turning point came when Arthur silently cast Expelliarmus, not at his brother's wand, but at the ground beneath him, destabilizing Cedric's footing and forcing a loss of balance that ended the match. Cedric fell to his knees. By the laws of duel of justice, he was deemed to have yielded. What happened next, however, would etch the event into the annals of wizarding lore. Standing over his defeated brother, Arthur raised his wand and spoke the traditional closing rite of the duel, as required by law. Then he turned to the council, bowed his head, and said, "I relinquish the inheritance. My cause was not greed, but truth. Let this name be clean." The chamber was silent. Even Cedric, still breathing heavily on the dueling platform, stared up in disbelief. Arthur's words became the subject of essays and debates for years after. Some hailed him as a paragon of integrity, others accused him of orchestrating the duel only to polish his reputation. Regardless of motive, the estate was formally signed over to Cedric, and Arthur returned to his modest estate in Durham, never speaking of the matter again. Such duels are not without risks. As explained in the Essential Wizarding Judiciary, a handbook still taught in select courses at the Wizengamot Academy of Magical Law, a duel of justice, while non-lethal in theory, must still maintain the possibility of defeat, risk, and injury, lest its moral weight be rendered meaningless. The purpose is not merely to determine strength, but to expose a soul's intent. The spells used are limited by ancient. No unforgettables, no magical creatures, no artifacts, and a panel of 3 magical judges monitors every moment. Still, emotions often run dangerously high. In 1786, a similar duel between 2 potion masters ended with both parties hospitalized and the case unresolved. This led to a temporary ban on the practice, which lasted nearly 50 years. The Montague duel, however, remains a rare example of this practice being used not only successfully, but with an outcome that shaped magical ethics. It was even referenced decades later during the trial of Bartemius Crouch Jr., when his father, in a heated Wizengamot session, scorned the idea of using duels to resolve matters of justice. "We are not savages," he thundered, "and we do not govern with our wands." The irony, of course, was lost on no one, as the very laws Barty Sr. defended had their roots in dueling codes of old. Even Albus Dumbledore, in a rare commentary found in the collected letters of the headmasters, acknowledged the cultural weight of such duels. "They are more than contests of magic," he wrote. "They are confessions written in fire and silence." It is difficult not to draw comparisons between this ancient rite and the more informal, though emotionally charged, duels seen within the walls of Hogwarts. When Harry Potter faced Draco Malfoy during the dueling club in his 2nd year, the stakes were personal, not legal. Yet the power dynamics, the spectacle, and the silent expectation of spectators echoed older traditions. In fact, one of the spells used that evening, Expelliarmus, was the very charm that ended the Montague duel a century earlier. As Professor Snape instructed the students, disarming is not merely about removing a wand, it is about removing advantage, power, and certainty. Modern wizarding society has largely shifted toward bureaucratic resolution. The Wizengamot now handles most disputes through careful deliberation and magical evidence. Veritaserum, memory extraction, and enchanted documentation have replaced the old ways. And yet whispers of dueling justice persist. In 1998, following the Second Wizarding War, there were rumors that certain members of the reformed Ministry of Magic considered reintroducing the practice for particularly complicated war crime trials. Though it was never enacted, the idea was discussed behind closed doors. Not all in the wizarding world believe such practices should remain buried. In a 2011 op-ed in the Daily Prophet, retired Auror Tiberius Flint wrote, "A duel, when governed and consented to, can reveal more truth in 10 seconds than a month of hearings. Fear of magic does not purify law, it shackles it." Flint had served in post-war trials, and his remarks sparked controversy across both magical and academic communities. The article drew letters from members of the council, professors at Hogwarts, and even several surviving Montague descendants. Those who study magical law today are still taught the Montague precedent. It is part of the required curriculum at the Wizarding Institute of Ethical Governance. Students read through the transcripts, examine the duel frame by frame via stored pensive memory, and write essays on the implications of Arthur's choice. Some argue that by forfeiting his claim, he subverted the very purpose of the duel. Others say he elevated it. One particularly insightful essay in the Journal of Magical Jurisprudence argued that Arthur Montague transformed a duel into a declaration. He did not fight to win property, but to restore meaning to his family's name. In doing so, he proved the duel's greatest power lies not in the victor's wand, but in the victor's will. Today the stones of Durnhold still stand, moss-covered and weathered by time. They are rarely visited, though ministry archivists maintain the protective wards. A single plaque at the site reads, "Here, justice was seen, not in the fall, but in the surrender." It is a quiet testament to a moment when two brothers stood before the law and chose a path older than parchment and more ancient than the court itself. In a world governed by laws and ledgers, it is comforting to know that somewhere in our magical heritage there remains a place for fire, honor, and the silence that follows truth. Number 21. Magical barriers protect spectators during tournaments. At the heart of every magical duel lies not only skill, instinct, and raw power, but also an invisible net of silent protection, the magical barrier. These barriers, woven by some of the most intricate defensive spells known to wizardkind, are designed to be the only thing separating a surge of deadly magic from a crowd of awestruck spectators. At first glance, an arena where two witches or wizards exchange spells that explode like comets and hiss through the air like vipers may seem a recipe for disaster. And it nearly became one during a warm June evening in 1998 when the European Dueling Championship in Hamburg turned from spectacle to chaos in a heartbeat. Magical barriers are not a modern invention. Even during the early days of organized dueling in the 17th century, some rudimentary versions of these wards were employed. They were mostly made to prevent hexes from hitting bystanders, but they lacked the sophistication of today's complex network of protections. In the modern age, professional dueling arenas use a blend of shield charms, absorption runes, and reflection sigils, all of which must be cast in precise succession by certified wardmasters before any match may begin. These wards are renewed before each duel, tested repeatedly, and are even reinforced mid-battle by invisible charms performed by mediwizards standing just off the edge of the arena. And yet, despite all this caution, the unthinkable still happened. The duel that year was between two of Europe's most ferocious contenders, Victor Belmira of Spain, known for his aggressive casting and volatile nature, and Marcus Krensov of Bulgaria, a cold strategist with an uncanny talent for piercing through magical defenses. The match was billed as the ultimate test of technique versus temperament. Thousands gathered in the oval-shaped Tannenwald arena, shielded behind what they believed were the most powerful protective barriers available. No one anticipated that within the first 5 minutes of the second round, a single spell would shake the very foundations of dueling safety. Belmira, already known for pushing the boundaries of acceptable spells, unleashed what appeared to be a modified version of Confringo, The blast, red and pulsing, didn't behave as expected. It didn't explode mid-air. It didn't even swerve when it hit Krenzov's defense. Instead, it bounced, ricocheted off the Bulgarian's own shield charm, and hurtled toward the western spectator wall. A loud humming echoed in the arena as the magic slammed against the barrier. And then, silence. A beat later, the western section of the protection dome cracked like glass. The spell broke through with a scream of energy, striking the uppermost row of seats and setting fire to 2 banners. The crowd erupted in screams. In that moment, dozens of emergency spells activated. A chain of protective nets collapsed from the ceiling like shimmering curtains. Mediwitches and auras dashed to the injured. Children were carried out in panic, parents screaming for each other across the smoky stands. It was like the spell didn't want to stop, wrote Cassandra Wilmore, a Daily Prophet correspondent who was present that day. The air felt charged like electricity, even after the flames had been extinguished. Remarkably, no one died, but 9 people were hospitalized, and one 11-year-old boy, Felix Olander, suffered temporary hearing loss from the explosion. The post-incident investigation was swift and brutal. It turned out that the western segment of the barrier had been reinforced improperly. The absorption rune layer was slightly misaligned, a mistake made during a rushed recasting earlier that morning. The rune smith responsible, a German witch named Erika van Bruggen, admitted under veritaserum that she had been distracted by conflicting schedules. Her failure, though accidental, cost her a lifetime ban from wardcrafting for public events. "I didn't sleep for a month," she later said in an interview. "Knowing that a boy was hurt because I missed a single stroke of my wand, it's something I still carry." The Department of Magical Games and Sports issued an emergency mandate. From July 1st, 1998, all magical dueling arenas in Europe were required to pass a rigorous 3-tier inspection before every match. Each barrier was to be tested not just by spell, but by simulated attacks, often involving controlled curses fired at empty stands. The regulation expanded further the next year, requiring the presence of at least 2 certified unspeakables to oversee barrier integrity at international events. The Tannenwald incident, as it became known, reshaped the future of magical sports safety. What many wizards and witches fail to realize is how much raw power these barriers withstand during just a single duel. According to the 7th edition of Magical Sports Defense and Danger, a high-level shield dome used in professional dueling must absorb and redistribute up to 250 kilojoules of magical energy every 60 seconds, roughly equivalent to a burst of dragon fire at close range. It's a miracle, many say, that such structures have held as long as they have. But that miracle is no longer taken for granted. One of the more striking examples of the updated protections was seen in the 2002 Dueling World Cup final, where a misfired blasting curse shattered a floor tile and flung stone shards toward the crowd. But this time, the new barrier system absorbed both the curse and the resulting debris, vaporizing it in mid-air before it reached the audience. "It was like watching lightning get swallowed," one spectator remarked. The audience didn't even flinch, proof that faith in the barriers had been, at least partly, restored. Even in the books that chronicled Harry Potter's years at Hogwarts, we find the dangers of unchecked spellfire emphasized. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, during Gilderoy Lockhart's ill-fated dueling club, Snape's quick reaction to Draco's rogue Serpent Sortia spell reminds readers of how fast things can escalate in a duel. Snape stepped forward and waved his wand. The snake vanished in a small puff of black smoke, the book notes. But that was a controlled school environment, far removed from the intensity of professional dueling, where spells aren't just for show. Despite the increased safety measures, dueling remains a dangerous sport. The very nature of magical combat is unpredictable. Each wand movement, each spoken incantation is an act of calculated risk. Professional duelists train not only to cast, but to anticipate, defend, and survive. The margins are thin, and no barrier, no matter how reinforced, is ever truly perfect. But after 1998, no one in the wizarding world dared to call the danger entertainment without adding the word contained. For Felix Orlander, the boy who suffered from the Hamburg blast, the event shaped his entire future. Inspired by the Mediwizards who helped him, he later attended the Stockholm Institute of Magical Healing and became one of the youngest certified barrier technicians in the Nordlands. In 2021, during an international symposium on magical safety, he spoke to an audience of young wardcrafters and said, "A spell isn't good or bad, it's how we protect others from it that defines our legacy." The tragedy also sparked artistic responses. A controversial painting titled "Crack in the Dome" by Romanian artist Iancu Varez depicted the moment of the barrier's collapse using enchanted canvas that flickered with real sparks. It was displayed at the Magical Museum of Modern Art in Florence for 2 months before it was removed due to complaints from survivors. Yet many argued that it was necessary to remember. "Magic forgets," said Varez in a letter, "but scars remember, and art is how we choose to keep those scars visible." Magical dueling is more than a sport. It is a ritual, a legacy, and a reflection of power contained by principle. The barriers we build, physical and magical, are not only shields, but also symbols. They remind us that with power comes not only danger, but duty. The Tannenwald incident remains a haunting chapter in the history of magical combat, but it is also a turning point that saved countless lives after it. For as long as duelists draw their wands and crowds gather to watch, those unseen walls of light will be tested again and again, not just by spells, but by the weight of memory. Number 22. Some spells are considered dishonorable. In the hidden world of wizards, where duels are not just contests of strength but tests of intellect, strategy, and character, there exists a fragile balance between power and honor. Magic, by its very nature, is a tool, a neutral force shaped by the hand that wields it. But in the arena of magical dueling, some choices echo far beyond the spell's impact. While the official rulebooks of magical tournaments never explicitly forbid specific spells, aside from the unforgivable curses, of course, every seasoned duelist knows there's more to combat than the letter of the law. Beneath the surface, woven into the history and tradition of wizarding culture, lies an unspoken code, an ethical line which, if crossed, marks a wizard not as a victor, but as a disgrace. This code is not taught at Hogwarts, not written down in any formal document, and not enforced by any governing body. Yet those who live by the wand, those who fight in front of audiences for honor or gold, understand its weight. It is a code passed down from mentor to student, from one dueling house to another, muttered in the back rooms of wand shops and in the corners of crowded pubs after a match. The code judges not the result of a duel, but how that result was achieved. A hex that blinds an opponent without warning may be perfectly legal, but in the eyes of the community, it's a foul as glaring as any Muggle's low blow. One such hex, the Lumen Tempestus spell, has long been controversial. Not found in any Hogwarts curriculum, this spell releases a burst of chaotic white light, bright enough to disorient and temporarily blind anyone within range. It causes no permanent damage, leaves no physical scars, but robs the opponent of vision, breaking their concentration and turning the duel into little more than target practice for the caster. Technically, it's not a dark spell and not on any banned lists. Yet, among professional duelists, its use without a verbal warning is equated with cowardice. To cast it is to admit that one fears a fair fight. Perhaps the most infamous practitioner of this spell was Ugo Richter, a German-born wizard who rose to prominence during the early 1980s. A formidable duelist with a background in experimental charms, Richter was known for his brutal efficiency and cold precision. His career was meteoric. In just 3 years, he amassed more wins than any of his contemporaries, dispatching opponents in under 2 minutes in most cases, yet his name was whispered with disdain, not respect. They called him Der blendende Rabe, the blinding raven, a mocking title that followed him from Berlin to Bruges, from Milan to Madrid. Richter's strategy was always the same. The moment the duel was signaled to begin, he would raise his wand and unleash a blinding flash. Before his opponent could react, he'd send a barrage of stunning spells, carefully calibrated to end the fight before it even began. He did not toy with his adversaries, nor did he revel in cruelty. He fought to win, and he won often. But with each victory, another door quietly closed to him. Invitations to elite tournaments, the Duellum Argentum, the Prague Midnight Circle, the Edinburgh Legacy League, began to dry up. Sponsors pulled their support. Even the famed Wandmasters Guild, known for its brutal pragmatism, refused to grant him formal recognition. His most controversial match took place in Vienna during the Alpine Invitational of 1983. Facing Elise Marchand, a rising star from France, Richter followed his typical pattern: a burst of light, a series of stunning spells, and victory in under 30 seconds. But this time, the crowd did not cheer. Marchand, known for her honourable style and dazzling shield work, was one of the sport's sweethearts. When she fell to her knees, blinking blindly as her wand clattered from her hand, the arena turned to silence. Later, in an interview with Witch Weekly, she said, "I trained for months for that match. I studied his duels. I was ready. But you can't prepare for someone who fights in shadows and pretends it's daylight." Even years later, Richter's name stirs discomfort among veteran duelists. In the Compendium of Competitive Magic by Wendell Trask, there is a footnote in the chapter on ethical combat that reads, "While victory by legal means is still victory, a duel without honor is merely legalized aggression." It is widely believed that this was a direct reference to Richter. Trask, a former duelist himself, had once faced Richter in an unsanctioned match behind closed doors. He lost, and never spoke of it again. The impact of Richter's approach reached beyond his own career. After the Vienna match, the Dueling Confederation began quietly circulating a list of discouraged spells, a sort of gentleman's blacklist. Lumen Tempesta topped the list. Though not banned, any duelist known to use it faced intense scrutiny, reduced sponsorships, and rejection from more traditional venues. It was not uncommon to see duelists who used such spells booed by the audience, or have their matches boycotted altogether. The Confederation never publicly admitted this list existed, but every trainer, every arena official, and every serious duelist knew it was real. Interestingly, not all forms of pain-inflicting magic are judged equally. The Flagrant Curse, which burns markings into surfaces and occasionally singes an opponent's robes, is considered theatrical but acceptable, even stylish when used with precision. The Tarantallegra Jinx, which forces an opponent's legs to dance uncontrollably, is often used for crowd-pleasing flair. But it is the intent behind the spell, the tool, and the surprise with which it is cast that determines its place on the scale of honor. A blinding flash at the start of a duel before the opponent can raise a wand is viewed as a betrayal of the sacred pact of fairness. The Hogwarts curriculum, curiously, does not address these cultural taboos. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, during the school's dueling club, Professor Snape uses the Expelliarmus spell to disarm Lockhart with ruthless precision. A useful spell, Expelliarmus, disarming your opponent. Only do it if you mean to win, he says. Though legal and widely accepted, even that spell, when used in unfair contexts, can draw frowns. But the lesson is clear: technique matters, but so does context, style, and timing. Some believe this code of honor stems from the old wizarding duels of the 17th century, when disputes were settled at dawn with seconds and witnesses. These duels were not just contests of strength, but displays of personal character. To win by trickery was to admit defeat in the higher sense. The tale of Jeremiah Blott and his duel with Percival Rook is still retold in wand law circles. Blott, though more powerful, forfeited the match when Rook's wand snapped mid-duel. "I could not strike a man who cannot strike back," he reportedly said, a moment that earned him a statue in the Ministry's Hall of Duelists. Richter, on the other hand, earned no statue. After his final match in Krakow in 1985, another win, another flash of light, he retired from the public eye. Rumours circulated that he had gone into private security, training curse-breakers or guarding vaults in Gringotts. Others said he moved to the Carpathians to develop new spellwork in solitude. What's certain is this: despite his undeniable talent, no one speaks of Richter with admiration. Fear, perhaps. Respect for his technique, maybe, but admiration, never. The world of magical dueling remains divided on where to draw the line. Some young duelists enamored with victory emulate Richter's methods, arguing that the battlefield is no place for honor. Others, like Helena Moore, current champion of the Northern League, publicly denounce such tactics. "If I can't win without blinding you first," she said in an interview, "then I don't deserve to win at all." Her duels, known for their elegance and clarity, are considered textbook examples of honorable combat. She even carries a wand once owned by Percival Rook, further tying her legacy to that of traditionalist ideals. What makes this conflict so fascinating is that it touches on a deeper truth about wizardry itself. Magic reflects the soul. A spell is not just an action, but a statement. To cast light in your opponent's eyes at the first moment, without warning, is to say, "I will not face you as an equal." And while that may win duels, it loses something far greater. In the end, as every true duelist knows, there is more at stake in the arena than the outcome. There is the legacy you leave behind. Number 23, some pureblood families keep secret dueling techniques. In the shadowed corridors of pureblood wizarding tradition, where history whispers louder than spellbooks and loyalty to bloodline surpasses even loyalty to the ministry, lies a little-known reality of magical dueling, the existence of secret family techniques. Passed down from generation to generation, these methods are rarely spoken of, never written, and certainly never taught outside the bounds of the family name. While Hogwarts provides a foundation in defense against the dark arts, and even boasts a dueling club for students curious to test their skills, the battlefield of real magical combat among the ancient houses is layered with hidden rules and forbidden knowledge. Among these techniques, one stands out like a blade in moonlight, an elusive maneuver known within the House of Knot as the Instant Circle. The Knots, an old pure-blood family mentioned briefly in the Order of the Phoenix, are usually discussed in hushed tones because of their ties to the dark arts and their discreet allegiance to Voldemort's cause. "Knot was a Death Eater too," Sirius Black once told Harry, his tone carrying more contempt than fear. Yet behind the name and its grim associations lies a lineage of strategic brilliance and dangerous magical intellect, cultivated through centuries of secret practices. The Instant Circle is not a spell in the traditional sense, but a physically demanding, magic-enhanced movement technique. It involves a precisely timed step combined with a hand flick, creating a shimmering loop of energy around the duelist. In a blink, the practitioner vanishes from their position and reappears a few feet away, facing the opponent from a new angle. This is not apparition, nor is it a disillusionment charm. It is something far more intricate. It's a blend of spellwork, physical discipline, and wand synchronization, so exact that only those trained from early childhood can master it. The result is confusion, panic, and, more often than not, victory. This technique, like others, guarded by old wizarding houses, was never seen during the dueling club events at Hogwarts. It is too valuable, too dangerous, and far too telling of one's heritage. The Knots would never have allowed Theodore Knott, a quiet but intelligent boy from Slytherin, to demonstrate anything so precious under Dumbledore's watchful eye. To the outside world, he was just another reserved pure-blood student. But within the manor walls, he was likely drilled in these techniques by his father and perhaps even older relatives who considered traditional dueling a sacred ritual. Dueling, after all, was once the preferred method of settling disputes among pure-bloods before the ministry began regulating magical conflict. In those days, to lose a duel was to risk losing family honor. families like the Lestranges, the Selwyns and the Rosiers, who all trace their bloodlines back hundreds of years, considered dueling as much a part of their legacy as their vaults in Gringotts. Some families kept notebooks enchanted to reveal their contents only to direct descendants. Others passed the knowledge orally through grueling nightly sessions where children repeated the names of counters and stances until they could cast them in their sleep. The Selwyn family, for example, was rumoured to have developed a unique hex chain technique, a sequence of minor jinxes that built on each other so rapidly that by the time the opponent cast a shield, they were already immobilized. It was never documented in any recognised spell compendium, nor taught at Durmstrang, Beauxbaton, or even the more liberal Hogwarts, yet whispers of the Selwyn chain appeared occasionally in confidential aura reports when unidentifiable spell patterns left investigators baffled and victims unconscious with no visible wounds. This secret tradition is not confined to the dark-leaning families. The Prewetts, relatives of the Weasleys through Molly, were fierce and honourable duelists. Fabian and Gideon Prewett, members of the original Order of the Phoenix, were known for their synchronised duelling, fighting as one unit, perfectly aligned in movement and strategy. Though they were killed by 5 Death Eaters, their legacy persisted in stories told by Moody and others who fought beside them. Moody once referred to them as a pair of excellent men, but there was something else he never said out loud. They moved as if guided by the same mind. Rumours suggest they trained in a Prewett family technique called the binding mirror, a method by which 2 duelists, sharing a bloodline, could temporarily link their magic for simultaneous casting. These hidden traditions lend an added layer of depth to the often romanticized image of dueling. When we think of Harry's duel with Draco in the Chamber of Secrets, what we see is mostly chaotic fun, a few hexes, a bouncing ferret, and a broken wand or two. But when Dumbledore stood against Voldemort in the Ministry of Magic's atrium, we witnessed the kind of silent knowledge and mastery that only comes with time, experience, and perhaps hidden instruction. "You do not seek to kill me, Dumbledore?" Voldemort asked. "We both know there are other ways of destroying a man." The battle that followed was not just 2 wizards clashing, it was 2 legacies colliding, one forged in secret, the other honed in the light. The power of these hidden techniques often lies not just in the spell itself, but in the execution. Timing, positioning, posture, all must be perfect. The Lestranges, feared even among Death Eaters, were said to utilize a method called the spiral grip, which twisted the opponent's wand hand mid-spell, causing ricocheted effects and misfires. Bellatrix, always a step ahead, seemed to anticipate where spells would land before they were even cast. Though wild in appearance, her style was shaped by structure few could understand. Many of these families treated dueling not merely as combat, but as performance. The movement of the wand, the way the caster turned their body, these were considered expressions of bloodline. In this way, magic was not just power, it was artistry, and families were its galleries. Wandless gestures, often dismissed by textbook-trained wizards as theatrics, were sometimes precise catalysts for advanced transfigurations or elemental spells known only to those who had inherited the knowledge. For the Ministry of Magic, these hidden traditions represent both a threat and a blind spot. Auras are trained in standard counters and ministry-approved spells, but when facing an opponent who fights with centuries of secret doctrine behind their wand, even the best aura may falter. Rufus Scrimgeour, former head of the Aura Office, once complained privately that some of these families teach their children to kill with a glance before they even know how to tie their shoelaces. It is perhaps for this reason that during the First and Second Wizarding Wars, so many duels ended with one side barely knowing what hit them. In the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, several Order members were wounded by spells they could not identify. Kingsley Shacklebolt, as seasoned a duelist as they come, admitted later that some curses we saw that night weren't in any manual. And yet, these families do not boast of their methods publicly. To them, secrecy is as sacred as power. The act of sharing even a glimpse of their knowledge outside the bloodline is considered betrayal. There are no schools for these arts, no official guilds, only homes filled with portraits that watch in silence as young children duel in candlelit chambers, learning movements older than the ministry itself. The true irony lies in how little of this makes it into public magical history. Hogwarts textbooks do not mention the instant circle, the Selwyn chain, or the spiral grip. They focus on generalized spellcraft, mass-accepted theory, and safety. And perhaps that is necessary, for if every witch or wizard knew how to weaponize their magic in the way the ancient families do, the wizarding world might fall into chaos. But to deny the existence of these secret legacies is to misunderstand the very fabric of magical society. Magic at its core is personal. It flows through families as much as through wands. And sometimes the deadliest spell is not the one in a book, but the one whispered by a grandfather to a child, never to be spoken outside the manor gates. Number 24. Expelliarmus became a symbol of moral strength. The first time Harry Potter cast Expelliarmus in a high-stakes duel, it wasn't about power, it was about principle. During the graveyard confrontation with Lord Voldemort in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, surrounded by Death Eaters and facing death itself, Harry didn't reach for a deadly curse or a powerful hex. He raised his wand, trembling, and cast a simple disarming charm, Expelliarmus! That choice, seemingly naive to some, became the defining act of a wizard who would rather disarm than destroy. In the heart of darkness, Harry chose light, not because he lacked strength, but because he believed in something deeper than conquest. This was the moment when Expelliarmus ceased being just a spell. It became a symbol of resistance, of restraint, and of a different kind of courage, one that doesn't revel in domination, but in mercy. When Harry faced Draco Malfoy on the Hogwarts Express at the start of his 6th year, the duel was brief, impulsive, and reflexive. But again, he used Expelliarmus. Malfoy was not an imminent threat in that moment, and yet Harry responded not with a curse meant to wound or humiliate, but with a charm that simply knocked his opponent's wand away. To those around him, it might have seemed underwhelming. After all, who builds a reputation with such a basic spell? But the pattern had been set. Time after time, Harry reached for the same answer, even when the question was life and death. In The Half-Blood Prince, Professor Snape disparagingly referred to Expelliarmus as a useful spell but hardly a match for the dark arts. And yet, by the end of the series, that very spell was the one that defeated Voldemort himself. It wasn't the power of the spell that mattered, it was the power of the wizard wielding it and the moral weight behind the choice. As Dumbledore once told Harry, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Harry chose mercy in a world that rewarded vengeance. He refused to let the war change who he was. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries in Order of the Phoenix, Harry fought side by side with his friends against trained Death Eaters. Most of them were outmatched, terrified, and panicked. But even in chaos, Harry leaned on Expelliarmus, as though tethering himself to a piece of his own identity. When facing Lucius Malfoy and Bellatrix Lestrange, surrounded by smoke, broken prophecies, and crumbling walls, he didn't fire killing curses. He fought to survive, yes, but not to kill. He was defending something more than his life. He was defending the idea that even in war, you do not become what you hate. In contrast, Voldemort represented the absolute opposite. For him, every duel was a contest of dominance. The first spell he ever taught his Death Eaters was likely not a defensive one. The killing curse, Avada Kedavra, was his signature, a green blaze of finality. He did not understand why Harry would spare his enemies, nor why he would use Expelliarmus in a duel to the death. "You dare use that spell on me?" Voldemort spat in the final battle. The irony was cruel. Voldemort, the Dark Lord, feared death so much he tore his soul apart to avoid it. Yet Harry, still whole, walked calmly into death, armed only with a disarming spell and unshakable conviction. Professor Remus Lupin once pointed out that Harry's reliance on Expelliarmus wasn't foolish, it was brave. "You're not weak, Harry," he said, "you're just not like them." In the world of dueling, many saw brutality as strength, quickness to hex as proof of power. But Harry reframed that. His style was rooted not in aggression, but in control. He fought without losing himself. He won not by overpowering his enemies, but by remaining untouched by their cruelty. This, Lupin argued, was a deeper kind of strength. Even in the climactic duel with Severus Snape on the Hogwarts grounds, Harry used Expelliarmus. Snape easily blocked it, as one might swat away a fly. But it was a revealing moment. Harry wasn't trying to destroy Snape. He was desperate for answers. This was not war, it was grief in motion. He could have attacked, he could have let rage take over, but Expelliarmus remained his default response. It was his voice when words failed, a cry for disarmament, for peace, for control over a world spiraling into destruction. In the Second Wizarding War, the Order of the Phoenix recognized the symbolic value of Harry's spell. In fact, it nearly cost his life. When multiple Harrys took to the sky during the escape from Privet Drive, the real one was identified because he used Expelliarmus. "That's him! The real one!" shouted a Death Eater. "He's not trying to kill anyone!" It was a moment that Dumbledore's army would later laugh about, but it exposed a truth. Harry's morality was not a mask. It was a beacon. His refusal to kill made him visible, vulnerable, human. When Harry finally stood before Voldemort in the Great Hall, the world watching and the walls echoing with the moans of the wounded and dying, he cast Expelliarmus. Voldemort, with his snake-like face and sunken eyes, hissed Avada Kedavra. Two beams of light met in mid-air, red and green, life and death, mercy and murder. The Elder Wand, sensing Harry's intent, turned against its master. The killing curse rebounded, Voldemort fell, struck by his own magic, and Harry, still breathing, still Harry, stood with his wand steady. He had won, without killing, without breaking. The message was undeniable. Expelliarmus had become more than a spell. It was a statement, an act of rebellion against a world that measured power in body counts, an assertion that there is more strength in restraint than in destruction. Every time Harry used it, he was telling the world, "I will not be like them. I will not kill to win. I will not trade my soul for victory." That is why, for generations of witches and wizards, Expelliarmus became the spell of the righteous. Not because it was flashy, but because it was unyielding. It was the spell of those who believed that justice did not require bloodshed, that peace was not weakness, that even in darkness you could cast a red light instead of green, and that light could be enough. When young duelists whispered about great wizards, they spoke not only of power but of choices, and Harry's choice echoed through every wand raised in defense, not offense. Dueling itself has always been a tradition steeped in pride and performance. From the days of Godric Gryffindor to the tournaments at Durmstrang, magical combat was about skill, precision, and flair. But never before had the moral weight of a single spell changed the cultural perception of magic so thoroughly. Harry redefined victory. He proved that the strongest wizards were not those who could kill, but those who could stop a fight without losing themselves in it. The textbooks would never say it outright. You won't find it in Standard Book of Spells Grade 6, but every student who has practiced dueling in the Room of Requirement, every young witch who raised her wand in fear and remembered that red spark instead of green, each of them knows what Expelliarmus means. It means you're still yourself. It means you haven't given up on being good. So when people scoff at Expelliarmus, when they say it's too basic, too schoolyard, too soft, they miss the point entirely. It takes more strength to show mercy than to yield to rage, and in a world where dark magic whispers promises of easy victory, choosing that humble, disarming charm is nothing less than an act of heroism, just like Harry always just like Harry. Number 25. Voldemort vs. Harry broke every rule of dueling. The final clash between Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort was never meant to be a textbook example of magical dueling. Instead, it shattered every known tradition, law, and expectation set by centuries of wizarding customs. The scene played out not in the quiet, ritualistic calm of a dueling chamber, but in the crumbling chaos of the Battle of Hogwarts. And this alone already marked a profound departure from any historical norm. What occurred in those final moments was not merely a duel, it was the last stand between two forces that had come to represent more than just individual power. They were the embodiment of hope and tyranny, of love and fear. The duel was unprecedented in every way, not only because of who fought, but because of how it was fought. From the very beginning, it lacked the most fundamental formality of a duel, the challenge. Traditionally, a wizard duel begins with a formal declaration or acceptance of combat. Wands are raised, opponents bow, the boundaries are defined, and a neutral party presides. None of this occurred. Harry did not step out onto a polished dueling floor. He emerged from the heart of a war zone, covered in dust, grief etched into his face. Voldemort did not challenge him in the manner befitting an ancient custom. He simply hurled the killing curse across the broken stones of Hogwarts with all the hatred of a man who had lost everything. There was no invitation to duel, there was only one intention: to end. The bow, the ceremonial sign of mutual respect between duelists, was also absent. Even during the dueling club hosted by Professor Lockhart years earlier, the students had been instructed to bow, reinforcing how deeply rooted this tradition was in wizarding culture. In that club, Harry and Draco had been made to bow before beginning, despite their adolescent animosity. Yet here, between Harry and Voldemort, there was no gesture of respect. How could there be? One had murdered, tortured, and dominated for years, while the other had suffered loss upon loss. A bow would have been mockery. Their magic surged not out of respect, but from the deep wells of trauma, rage, and resolve. There was also no protective barrier to separate them. In formal duels, magical or physical boundaries are sometimes established to prevent interference or accidental harm to onlookers. In the final battle, however, the entire Great Hall, and indeed all of Hogwarts, was the arena. Others fought around them, unaware in many cases of the significance of what was happening just meters away. This was not a controlled environment. It was the wild storm of war. As Rowling wrote, and Harry knew that the end had come, the end of all of it. He didn't wait for a judge to call a start. He walked straight into fate. Even the presence of a judge, essential in every official duel, was missing. No one mediated the terms, no one set limits, no one would declare the victor. Harry and Voldemort were not interested in winning points or proving skill. They were each aiming to decide the final shape of the magical world. Their spectators were not judges, but terrified allies and enemies alike, watching as history bent in real time. As Neville Longbottom fought off Death Eaters behind a pillar, as Professor McGonagall conjured suits of armor to defend the school, Harry and Voldemort circled each other not as sportsmen, but as destiny's instruments. This was never a duel for pride or honor. This was a duel for survival. And more than that, it was a duel for the soul of the wizarding world. Voldemort was not merely trying to kill Harry, he was trying to extinguish the very idea that love and loyalty could triumph over dominance and fear. Harry, by contrast, was not driven by hatred or vengeance. His wand was not moved by rage, but by understanding. When he confronted Voldemort in those final moments, he had already understood a great secret, one Voldemort had overlooked his entire life. The Elder Wand, though held by Voldemort, had never belonged to him. This detail, more than any flashy spell work, decided the outcome. As Voldemort shouted Avada Kedavra and Harry cast Expelliarmus, the wands did not simply meet in the air, they answered to truth. And Harry, with the unerring skill of the Seeker, caught the wand in his free hand as Voldemort fell backward, arms splayed, the slit pupils of the scarlet eyes rolling upward. It was not brute strength or magical superiority that decided the victor. It was a deeper understanding of wand lore, loyalty, and the magic of intention. No traditional duel in wizarding history had ever ended in such a fashion. There was no curse flying back at the caster. There was no counterspell to block a deadly strike. There was simply one spell that failed and another that succeeded, not because of strength, but because of ownership. The wand Voldemort used did not recognize him as its master. It had never belonged to him, and in that moment it refused to murder for him. This outcome wasn't dictated by force, but by the deep and complex bonds that connected wand and wizard, a truth Voldemort had never understood. It is worth remembering that Harry had been in a position to kill before. In the Ministry of Magic, in the Forbidden Forest, and even during the escape from Malfoy Manor, he had been pushed to his limits. But he never once used an unforgivable curse with deadly intent. That restraint, born of principle, contrasted sharply with Voldemort's endless cruelty. And it mattered, because in the magical world, intention carries weight. As Ollivander once said, the wand chooses the wizard, but it also responds to the wizard's soul. The atmosphere of their duel was not one of showmanship, as might have been seen in the past among dueling champions or even political rivals. There were no fancy flourishes, no performative gestures. Each movement was calculated, minimal, raw. The silence around them was filled not with suspense, but with the sound of collapsing stone and the cries of the wounded. This was not the climax of a tournament. It was the collapse of an era. And even in victory, there was no celebration. Tom Riddle hit the floor with a mundane finality, Rowling writes. No explosions, no grand spectacle, just a body finally at rest. The duel was also symbolic in the deepest sense. It was the culmination of a decade-long saga of moral choices, personal sacrifice, and misunderstood power. Harry had always been an unlikely hero, not the strongest, not the most gifted, but the one who chose to fight, not because he loved war, but because he loved peace. Voldemort, in his endless quest for domination, had become the perfect foil to Harry's selflessness. Their battle was not about technique, it was about belief. Harry stood not alone, but as the embodiment of every choice made along the way, to love, to protect, to endure. The absence of rules in the final duel reflects how much the world had changed. The war had erased the luxury of order. In a sense, the duel was a mirror of the chaos surrounding them, and yet within that chaos Harry brought clarity. He walked into that moment with knowledge, with calm, and with purpose. His refusal to kill, even then, was not weakness, it was strength. Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love. Dumbledore's words rang truer than ever. In that final act, Harry became more than a survivor. He became a symbol of a better world. Even Voldemort's own magic betrayed him. The curse he had used to murder so many Avada Kedavra met a defense so simple it seemed impossible. Expelliarmus, a spell used to disarm and not destroy. But that simplicity was its power. It spoke of a wizard who never wanted to dominate, only to protect. In this way, the duel turned every expectation on its head. It wasn't a clash of titans ending in thunder and fire. It was a precise, poetic echo of their first meeting in the graveyard. Only this time, Harry was ready. This time, love did not lose. The duel is remembered not only for what happened, but for what it meant. It marked the end of fear, the collapse of a reign built on pain, and it redefined victory. In a world where power was often measured by destruction, Harry showed that true strength lies in preservation. He honored the lives that had been lost not by revenge, but by ending the cycle. He broke not only the wand, but the legacy of its misuse. In that quiet finality, amid the wreckage of war, something new began. The duel, lawless as it was, became the foundation of a future where rules would be rewritten by compassion, not conquest, Number 26. Using potions in a duel is cheating. In the world of wands and wizardry, where every flick of the wrist might mean triumph or defeat, magical dueling has long been a revered art, elegant, dangerous, and steeped in traditions as old as Hogwarts itself. Though many spells are allowed, from simple jinxes to complex defensive enchantments, there is one boundary that cannot be crossed: the use of potions. Few outsiders know this, but in the tight-knit world of professional magical dueling, using a potion during a match is considered the gravest form of cheating, even more shameful than using a dark curse. And that unshakable rule can be traced directly to one infamous name: Gregory Shire. Born in 1939 in rural Devon, Gregory Shire was a wizard of humble origins, the son of a broomsmith and a potion mistress. He entered the British Duelist League at the tender age of 21, dazzling the audience not with flash, but with precision. His movements were economical, his wand work measured, and his strategy surgical. Between 1960 and 1965, he rose through the ranks like wildfire. Known for his signature combination of Expelliarmus and Petrificus Totalis, Shire boasted a record that would remain unmatched for nearly 3 decades. His dueling style was widely taught at private wizarding clubs across the country, but underneath the brilliance lay a secret that would bring his career and reputation crashing down in one swift stroke. Potions had always been a grey area in magical lore. In academic settings and emergencies, they were encouraged. Even in some magical sports like broom polo, players would use minor stamina-enhancing drafts to keep focused during long matches. But dueling was different. According to the Rules and Ethics of Magical Engagement, published in 1882 by the International Confederation of Wizards, any external enhancement, magical or chemical, during a duel was prohibited. No participant, the book stated, shall partake of any brew, charm, or enchantment that directly alters their natural reflex, magical output, or physical condition during a sanctioned match. Albus Dumbledore once paraphrased this principle in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, saying, "In dueling, as in life, the strength of one's magic lies not in what is consumed, but in what is conjured." What made Shire's fall so stunning wasn't just the betrayal of trust, it was the spectacle. In the 1965 National Dueling Finals held at the Chartersley Dome in Surrey, he faced off against Scottish prodigy Fiona McGraw. McGraw was known for her brutal reducto bursts, and many expected her to unseat Shire's unbeaten record. But from the moment the duel began, something seemed off. Shire moved faster than ever before, dodging spells with an almost inhuman grace. He didn't sweat, didn't stagger, and his wand emitted magic with an alarming efficiency. Spectators said he seemed possessed, others enchanted. Within 20 seconds, Fiona McGraw was disarmed, bound, and unconscious. The crowd cheered, but the league judges frowned. 2 days later, a private investigator hired by McGraw's sponsor revealed that Shire had secretly ingested a rare potion before the match, a blend known among potion masters as Vita Vigoratus, or, more commonly, the life-giving tonic. This brew, originally created by healer Elfrida Doddridge in the 18th century for treating long-term magical fatigue, had 3 distinct effects: tripled muscular output, accelerated reaction time, and temporary resistance to spell-induced dizziness. All 3 effects had been observed in Shire's duel. He had cheated, but in a way that was undetectable by traditional magical scans. The League had never expected someone of his stature to cross such a line. Shire denied it at first, but then a half-empty flask was discovered in his robes, laced with residue of mandragora extract and cinchona bark, key ingredients in the illegal tonic. He confessed before the League tribunal. The verdict was swift and brutal: lifetime disqualification, erasure of all recorded titles, and the stripping of his dueling license. It was like watching Merlin fall, said one reporter for the Daily Prophet, a legend reduced to alchemist's dust. In the years that followed, the story of Gregory Shire became cautionary law. Dueling clubs from Oxford to Ottery St. Catchpole taught his rise and fall as a parable. A rule was instated in 1966. All duelists, regardless of rank, must now undergo a pre-match examination, a combination of veritaserum questioning, wand analysis, and potion screening. The so-called Shire Clause has remained in effect ever since. No duelist, even today, can step onto a tournament stage without passing the test. Some historians have debated whether the punishment was too harsh. After all, Shire had not used an unforgivable curse, nor had he physically injured McGraw. But the betrayal lay not in violence. It lay in the breach of trust. Dueling is as much about discipline as magic, and the moment one competitor gains an artificial edge, the entire framework of fair magical combat begins to collapse. Even Severus Snape, a known potion prodigy, once sneered at the idea of using brews in battle. "A duelist who relies on flasks," he remarked during a Hogwarts lesson, "is one accident away from a broken bottle and a broken nose." Ironically, it was Shire's own mother who had brewed the tonic. A known healer in Devonshire, she had given it to her son after a particularly draining quarter-final in 1965. Though she claimed ignorance of the potion's future misuse, her role complicated matters. The Wizengamot briefly considered charging her with illegal brewing, but dropped the charges in light of her cooperation and lack of intent. Still, her business shuttered within weeks. The stigma of the scandal extended far beyond the dueling ring. The emotional toll on Fiona McGraw was considerable. Though she returned to dueling the following year, she never reclaimed her earlier dominance. In an interview with the Evening Prophet in 1973, she reflected, "That duel taught me more about honor than any classroom ever could. Not because I lost, but because I realized how deeply some people fear losing enough to become someone else." Her words would later be inscribed on a plaque outside the British League's headquarters. Even today, mention of potions in a duel can ignite heated debate. Some younger wizards argue that minor tonics, like anti-nausea brews or mental clarity drafts, should be permitted, but the League has maintained its stance. No potion, no matter how mild, is to be used from the moment a duelist enters the arena until the final spell is cast. Dueling, as League Master Alberic Roll once wrote, is an art of immediacy. A duel is a portrait painted in seconds, no time for mixing colours in bottles. The Shire scandal also prompted the rise of dry duel training, combat without magical enhancements of any kind. Auras, hit wizards, and curse breakers began practicing more rigorous wand-only scenarios. Many cite the Shire incident as a turning point in magical ethics, the moment when the wizarding world realized that even its brightest stars could blur the line between genius and deceit. In an ironic twist, Shire lived out the rest of his days in obscurity. He opened a wand-polishing shop in Knockturn Alley under the name G.S. and was rarely recognized. Some say he never again picked up a wand in combat. Others claim he offered private lessons to young duelists, but only those willing to swear an oath of honesty before entering his studio. Among magical historians, Shire's name is treated with a blend of awe and regret. He is a cautionary tale etched into the margins of every duelist's manual. His story is not just about one man's fall, but about the fragility of honor in a world where power can be brewed in a cauldron. And so, to this day, every duelist knows you may carry your wand, your courage, and your skill. But if you carry a flask, you carry your downfall. Number 27. Dueling styles vary across the magical world. In the dusky amphitheatre beneath the Carpathian Mountains, where the prestigious Durmstrang Institute holds its annual winter trials, the snow crackles under the weight of magic. Here, duelists are not taught to dance, they are trained to dominate. The clash of wands echoes like thunder as Viktor Karkaroff, a seventh-year prodigy, delivers a devastating confringo with a sharp, downward slash of his U-wand. His opponent, a stocky sixth-year named Borislav, barely manages to conjure a deflection before being hurled backward by the raw force of the spell. At Durmstrang, power is not hidden behind flourish or charm. It is weaponized, sharpened like steel, and unleashed without hesitation. Students here are not encouraged to show restraint. Their duels are brutal, decisive, and driven by a deep-rooted belief in magical superiority. By contrast, the leafy courtyards of Ilvermorny hum with a quieter sort of tension. Here, duelists do not aim to overpower their opponents with brute force. Instead, they maneuver like chess players. At the northeast dueling ring, surrounded by statues of the 4 school founders, a duel between Naomi Renshaw of Thunderbird House and Jacob Ellis of Horned Serpent unfolds with eerie precision. Naomi casts Obscuro to blind Jacob temporarily, only to follow it up with a deceptive Ventus, hoping to unbalance him while appearing to simply clear the air. Jacob, suspecting misdirection, conjures a reflective barrier instead of a counterattack. The match lasts nearly 20 minutes, not because the students are weak, but because each move is calculated, each feint layered. Strategy trumps spectacle in Ilvermorny's doctrine. The style of magical dueling is not simply a matter of school tradition, it is an embodiment of national character and magical philosophy. French duelists, many of them graduates of the Beauxbatons Academy of Magic, nestled in the Pyrenees, are the epitome of elegancy. Their movements are fluid, almost balletic. Camille Desrosiers, who once participated in an international tournament in Marseille, enchanted spectators not with the power of her spells, but with the artistry of her execution. Her protego was a silk ribbon, not a shield. Her offensive spells were released with a twist of the wrist that resembled calligraphy. Even when casting Expelliarmus, her wand arced gracefully, as if sketching a signature in mid-air. As Fleur Delacour, herself a Beauxbatons graduate, once noted in the Daily Prophet, magic must have beauty. Without beauty, it is just violence. The Japanese school of Mahotokoro, perched high on the volcanic slopes of Minami Iwo Jima, teaches an altogether different philosophy. Their duelists move with such speed and precision that, to an untrained eye, it appears as though spells are being cast without wands at all. Masaru Hayashi, an alumnus of the school, and now a famed magical historian, once demonstrated a traditional Mahotokoro duel for an international audience. Within 3 seconds, he cast 6 different jinxes while leaping from one position to another, each step mirroring a kata from martial arts. His movements were so controlled, so rehearsed, that they resembled a ceremonial dance, and yet each flick of his wand bore lethal potential. Mahotokoro values discipline, synchronicity, and the blending of magic with physical grace. Hogwarts itself, of course, has its own traditions. British dueling, for all its formality, is a curious blend of aggression and sportsmanship. During Harry Potter's second year, he was forced into a public duel with Draco Malfoy as part of Professor Lockhart's ill-fated dueling club. The result was more comedic than instructional, yet it revealed a great deal about British magical culture. "Scared, Potter?" Malfoy taunted, wand raised. "You wish," Harry replied. Spells were fired quickly, but without rhythm or restraint. When Malfoy's serpent sortier conjured a snake, and Harry responded by speaking Parseltongue, the entire room fell into stunned silence. It was a chaotic demonstration, but it showed that at Hogwarts dueling was just as much about identity as it was about technique. Interestingly, some of the most disciplined duelists in history have emerged from underrepresented schools. Wagadu, the wizarding school hidden in the mountains of the moon in Uganda, trains its students in wandless magic. Their duels do not begin with the flourish of wood, but with intense focus and gesture. Wandless magic requires such a level of concentration that even the simplest charm becomes a feat of endurance. In 1993, a visiting duelist from Wagadu stunned British wizards by defeating 3 Hogwarts students simultaneously using only silent incantations and movements of her fingers. According to Professor Flitwick, it was like watching magic paint itself into being, raw, but impossibly refined. Back at Durmstrang, the roots of their philosophy can be traced to the early doctrines of Harfang Munter, one of the school's most infamous headmasters. He believed that the purpose of magical education was to prepare wizards for war. His dueling curriculum emphasized offensive hexes, stamina, and ruthlessness. Students were taught to master Reducto, Incendio Maxima, and Crucio-adjacent spells, though the latter were forbidden in official matches. The result was a generation of duelists who fought like gladiators. Even decades later, the Durmstrang alumni who enter international competition tend to be the most feared. They strike hard, fast, and often first. At Ilvermorny, however, it is the legacy of Professor Johanna Beckley that shapes their approach. A war veteran of the 1920s Goblin rebellions in North America, Beckley believed in the importance of psychological warfare. Her teaching emphasized misdirection, spells that confused, clouded, or cloaked. "The greatest spell," she wrote in The Invisible Duelist, "is the one your enemy never sees." It is a principle still taught to this day. Ilvermorny students are known for their unpredictable style. They might cast a harmless lumos simply to distract before launching a delayed stupefy from behind a conjured mirror. In Mahutakoro, dueling is not even referred to as combat, but as mago no mai, the dance of spells. Students must master movement patterns called kenbo, which align footwork, wand strokes, and breathing. Before being allowed to duel, students must pass a test called shikanoma, where they must perform a solo kata under the observation of 3 instructors. The fluidity of this system explains why Mahutakoro duelists are nearly impossible to pin down. In 2011, during the International Wizarding Duels in Seoul, Ayaka Fujimoto dodged 17 hexes in a row without casting a single spell. She simply moved. French traditions, meanwhile, lean toward theatricality. A duel is not just a contest of skill, but a performance. Beauxbatons teaches students to use visual flair to disorient opponents. A favorite technique among graduates is the fleur mirage, a rapid sequence of light spells that explode into color, masking the true spell hidden within. Camille Desrosiers used this technique to defeat a Bulgarian opponent in 2015. "The duel was over before he realized I had even begun," she said in an interview. "He was too busy watching the lights." Wizards from Castellobruxo, the Brazilian school nestled deep within the rainforest, bring a unique jungle-born intuition to their duels. Their magic is deeply tied to nature and rhythm. Spells are often channeled through objects other than wands, carved wooden staves, enchanted vines, or even living familiars. Duels at Castellobruxo are often accompanied by the pounding of ceremonial drums, creating a hypnotic atmosphere. In one famed match, duelists battled while rain poured from the sky and tree branches moved to shield and distract, as if the forest itself were a third combatant. There are, of course, hybrid styles, duelists who have trained across borders. One such example is Elodie Kraus, born in Germany, trained in Beauxbatons and later at Mahutakoro. Her dueling style is an amalgam of poise and precision, often baffling her opponents. At the 2022 Tri-School Invitational, she opened with a graceful French mirage, only to follow it with a Mahutakoro-style sidestep and a devastating hex. "I don't fight like a nation," she once wrote. "I fight like a question that no one can answer." The Ministry of Magic in Britain once attempted to standardize dueling practices for international cooperation, but the effort failed spectacularly. Wizards from different cultures resisted the idea of conformity, viewing it as a threat to their heritage. Even today, international dueling tournaments are judged by panels of multicultural arbiters who are trained to recognize the legitimacy of different techniques. As one judge noted, a wand raised vertically might be aggression in Britain, but in Japan, it's respect. The beauty of magical dueling lies in its diversity. While spells may be universal, The hands that cast them are shaped by centuries of tradition, language, climate, and belief. From the icy halls of Durmstrang to the windswept peaks of Mahutukoro, each duel is more than a contest. It is a story, written in sparks and shields, wands and willpower,